What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. So once again, another SWI today, and we're actually going to be talking about none other than the iPhone 6s Plus. Now this is one of my favorite phones ever, and I think it's a lot of your guys' favorite phones too, because this was one of the most watched SWIs I did of last year, which if you don't know what a SWI is, it's still worth it, video that I always do. And what's interesting about this specific phone is that I owned this phone for, about a year. It was the second iPhone that I used as a main phone, and it really helped build this channel because I would do so many videos about it and people would watch them, and thus the YouTube channel was made. But the iPhone 6s Plus came out in 2015 in September, and it's actually going to be turning 5 years old this year. And honestly, it has a lot of value still left in it, for the price. I think it's a tremendous phone. I think for a lot of people out there, when you consider the price point and how old it is and the software support that it's still getting, I think it's a pretty interesting device at the end of the day. Now, if you have all the money to spend in the world, obviously get the latest and greatest iPhone 11 or 11 Pro, whatever, but the 6s Plus is a pretty decent value for money, man. Looking at the front, you have a 5.5-inch IPS panel. This one is 1080p, which is really good, and I'll definitely tell you the screen itself has kind of held up throughout the years. And even if you look at something like the iPhone XR or something, like, yes, those panels are better, and even though they're lower resolution, they look better at the end of the day. But the 6s Plus's panel, for a 1080p panel, it's really not bad, and it's actually pretty good. Again, this phone came out almost 5 years ago, and a 5-year-old panel is not going to look as good as a new panel, but I think it still looks pretty decent at the end of the day. But really the only downside of this phone would probably be the way it looks. And this is really, universal from the iPhone 6 all the way to the iPhone 8 Plus. Those phones really don't look the best, especially nowadays. Some people might like that design, but when we have phones like the OnePlus 7 Pro and the iPhone 11 and probably the SE2 or whatever is going to come out next year that's going to be notchless, you're going to have a phone that's going to look a bit dated. And I still see a lot of people rocking this type of design. I personally, obviously I own all iPhones, so I don't really care about it, but some people might feel like they have an older phone, but you shouldn't feel like that. It's really about the internals of the phone, not the outside, bro. Remember what they said back in middle school, it's not about how you look, it's what's inside, and I think the 6s Plus fits that perfectly. This phone does have Force Touch 2, which is really cool. The 11 Pro do not have anything like that. On the bottom, you have the Lightning port, which is really cool, as well as a headphone jack. That is something that a lot of phones do not have, including the brand new iPhones. Apparently the new Samsung Galaxy S series, whatever they're going to call it, S11, S20, those phones aren't going to have headphone jacks either. The iPhone 6s Plus does have that humongous advantage, and I was going to go upgrade to the 7 Plus when I had the 6s Plus, but I was just so scared of getting a phone that didn't have a headphone jack, but I upgraded and it's literally not that big of a deal, so you'll get over it pretty quickly, I think. On the back, you can see we have a single camera setup and no glass back, no wireless charging on this phone. That's definitely what kind of ages this phone. You don't have anything like that that's kind of standard on a lot of phones nowadays, but it is what it is, and that pretty much covers it up in terms of the outside. No SD card slots, nothing like that. You guys already know this is an iPhone, but I think for the price you're paying, I don't think you're expecting that much. If you want to get a phone that has all those things, obviously go get the newest iPhone or go get the newest Samsung or whatever. But for an older phone, I think the design and everything is kind of expected when you're getting a phone of this price and this age. So that kind of covers up everything on the outside. No IP certification, no nothing like that, which is kind of a big deal. It did have some water resistance, but Apple never IP certified it. So at the end of the day, it is what it is. And on the outside, that pretty much covers it. Now, hitting on the software, this is one of the most trickiest things to talk about, because I honestly, we're kind of talking a few months down the line, so I don't have any insider information on whether the iPhone 6s Plus is going to be getting iOS 14 or not. But what I can tell you is, from my experience, based off Apple's previous, launches of phones and everything like that, and even iPods, funny enough, an iPod is thrown into here, I very rarely have seen Apple extend 2 phones in a row the extra software versions, so it wouldn't be like the iPhone 5 got an extra software support and then the iPhone 5s got an extra year software support. We usually don't see that, so the reason I bring that up is because the iPod Touch 7th generation that came out has the same chipset as the iPhone 7, so that makes me think that the iPhone 7 might get an extra year of software support. And because of that, I don't think the 6s or the 6s Plus are going to get an extra year. Now, I could be totally wrong. I hope that's not the case, but it could be a possibility. So I honestly don't know if it's getting iOS 14 or not in a couple months when you watch this. And if you're watching this in June, you'll obviously know the answer. But now in January, I honestly don't know. If I had to guess, I would say no, but I wanted to get the extra version of software. I think that would be a really cool step for Apple. So that kind of covers that in terms of software. But the 6s Plus has a humongous thing for its software, and actually it's not even software, it's a hardware thing, and that's actually an infinite jailbreak. This is an unpatchable jailbreak that Apple cannot patch, technically speaking, easily. It's a hardware jailbreak that's affected on the iPhone 5S all the way to the iPhone 10, so the 6S Plus does fit in that thing. It's called a checkring jailbreak. I made a tutorial on how to install it if you want to watch it. You don't really have to if you don't want to, but that is a humongous advantage for the 6S Plus. You have that ability on this phone, which you do not have on even the latest iPhone 11 and 11 Pro. There's a possibility that those phones will eventually get a jailbreak, but as of right now, the 6S Plus is compatible with that jailbreak, which is a humongous feature, and that's awesome. I literally love seeing that. So you can get all those tweaks, all those things on an older iPhone, which even the iPhone 11, some of those tweaks are not features for those specific phones, which is pretty crazy to say. So in terms of that, in terms of the software and overall longevity, that pretty much covers that. Now, hitting on the performance, I pretty much talked about this yesterday in that iPhone 6S video, but the iPhone 6S Plus came out with the Apple A9 chip, a dual-core CPU, and 2GB of RAM on all the models. There was a 16, 32, 64, and 128GB model, and all those models had 2GB of RAM. And what I can tell you about the performance is without a doubt, it's a good performing phone for the price. It's not an amazing phone. Obviously, the 11, 11 Pro, those phones are much faster, but for the price you're paying for, dude, it really doesn't get much better. It's a smooth experience. I've had many Androids that came out in 2015, and even those aren't as fast and as smooth of an experience as the 6S Plus. It's a very good performing phone. It's very, the best way I can put it, it's very much what you expect. You don't expect it to be super slow, but you don't expect it to be super fast either. It's very, very, universally a smooth experience. And I did many comparisons between the 6S Plus and the iPhone 11, and you can watch those speed tests if you want to. And out of all those ones, yes, the iPhone 11 was pretty much faster every single time, but the 6S Plus is still a good performing phone. It wasn't like it was beating it by like a billion seconds. It was like kind of right behind the iPhone 11 in a lot of cases. And even last year, I made that video about, in some cases, my 6S Plus being faster than my iPhone 10 and even my iPhone 8 Plus. And maybe that was a software issue, maybe that was whatever, but that kind of says a lot about the 6S Plus and its longevity. So even if it doesn't get software support, even if it ends or whatever, it's still going to be a fast phone no matter what. And for the price point and for the age of it, it's a very fast phone, and I wouldn't be worried about the performance if I was picking up a 6S Plus. So that kind of covers that in terms of performance standpoint. Now hitting on the camera real quick, like I said, a single camera on the back, a single camera on the front, a 12 megapixel back facing camera, and a 5 megapixel front facing camera. Now this was actually the first iPhone to bring 4K video resolutions that we can film at, so we can do 4K at 30 frames per second, which is really cool. The front camera is 1080p, and really in terms of quality and everything, I don't think it's a bad camera quality at all. I think it does a pretty decent job at the end of the day, but what I will tell you is that it has two main issues. The one being software. It's really like not the craziest software. There's really not that many features built in, especially on the 6S Plus, let alone like the iPhone 11s and all those. But what I will say is that the biggest problem with this phone is looking at it now and, kind of looking at it what we have now in 2020 versus what we have in then 2015, is that most of the features and everything that cameras have nowadays aren't necessarily features built into the camera or megapixel counts or anything. It's all hardware features. It's all telephoto lenses and ultra wide sensors and crazy things like that. And we don't necessarily have those on the iPhone 6S Plus. It's not a big deal to me, but it might be a big deal to you. And that's definitely one thing you'll be missing out on if you pick up a 6S Plus in terms of camera quality, if I'm being honest. So the quality itself of the photos aren't bad, but the lenses are kind of what's missing for this specific phone. So that kind of covers it up in terms of a camera standpoint. Now hitting on the battery life, this is the last thing I'm going to hit on. This thing has a 2750 mAh battery on stock when it was released, but as you guys know, batteries degrade on all devices, not just iPhones. So it's not at that full 2000 whatever. It's probably going to be at like 2300, maybe even less than that. My specific iPhone 6S Plus's battery health is at like 80%, which is pretty low. So I'm going to have to replace it at some point. But the good news is that Apple still is replacing batteries for these specific phones. But the other thing is that parts to repair this phone are super cheap. So you can go pick up a battery yourself from eBay or wherever. Go open your iPhone 6S Plus and replace that battery yourself. And it's not an easy process to do, but I've done it before and it's really not an insane process. So if you even know how to unscrew something and screw something back and you're able to watch a tutorial, I would probably end up doing it that way, honestly, man. I mean, it's not a crazy thing. And that's one of the highlights of this phone. Parts to repair this phone are super cheap. If you break the screen, if you crack a camera lens or whatever, you can easily replace it for pretty cheap on eBay versus if you cracked an iPhone 11 screen. You'll have to go to Apple to fix that and that's going to cost a ton of money. But the 6S Plus is not like that. So ultimately, is the iPhone 6S Plus still worth it in 2020? To answer that question, honestly, I think it is still worth it. I think there's still a value in it. If you have like an older iPhone, like an iPhone 5S or an iPhone 4, or you have a Galaxy S3 or something like that, getting an iPhone 6S Plus is a pretty decent purchase. and I think it's a decent pickup. If you already own a 6S Plus, I would say keep it until like at least the new iPhones come out in September. It will at least last you until then. Even if it does get iOS 14 or it doesn't, it'll at least last you until then in terms of software support. So I would just keep it until then. I don't think there's like a crazy reason to upgrade. However, I will say if you even have a little bit more money to spend, I would say if you have like 300 or 400 to spend, I would say pick up an iPhone 8 Plus, a used iPhone 8 Plus, or a used iPhone 10. You can probably pick one up for around that price. But a 6S Plus will still do you justice for a little bit longer, and the speed and performance in and of itself, and the software support, the build quality, the parts to repair, those things in and of itself will last you that long. There are some things that are missing out, like I said, camera lenses. It's not the fastest thing in the world. It doesn't have an OLED display. Battery life could be hit or miss depending on how degraded that battery is, but ultimately it is what it is. I think it's a decent pickup in 2020 for the right price. So if you want to pick up a used one, I'll find the cheapest one on Amazon and I'll link it down straight in the description below so you guys can get it from there and help support the channel at the same time. But that is pretty much it. If you guys have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that will mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those things are linked down below. I'd really appreciate if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.